Good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to our online discussion of the book of Matthew. We're all back together, all three of us. It seems like the last 2 weeks it was me and Nick and then me and Curtis, and actually next week it's just going to be these two guys. But for tonight, it's all three of us, and we're going to be working through the book of Matthew as we have been doing. I hope you've been encouraged by this study. I know I have been. It's helped me grow. I hope you've enjoyed the Zoom discussion too. Let's get into the text tonight. As you remember, the book of Matthew is written to prove to the Jews that Jesus is a promised Messiah. There's an emphasis on righteousness. There's an emphasis on the kingdom. There's an emphasis on, as we looked at this last week, even having the right heart before God. Any of you guys want to bring up something as we set the stage for this week? You know, we left off in chapter 12, and I don't want to do a bunch of review this week. I think our audience has a pretty good grasp on the book of Matthew now. We're in the middle of Jesus' ministry, and we just finished up kind of a controversial section or chapter in Matthew chapter 12. What stood out to you guys about that study there?
The concept of repentance and needing to get the heart right and actually following through with it.
Right.
With going back to chapter 22, that section that starts there.
I mean, verse 22.
Verse 22, yes, excuse me. Chapter 12, verse 22, where the Pharisees are contrasting the kingdom of Satan versus the kingdom of God, and what their heart was revealing. It talks about how that there are no loose lips. It's just what the tongue reveals what the heart is.
Yeah, now we know how they really are. They can't fake it any longer.
Yep, right.
They've
and it
tried
shows that they don't know what the kingdom really is all about.
Oh, they don't get it.
Yeah.
And they feigned interest in Jesus enough to give us a sign, but he's like, look, you're an evil adulterous generation. You don't want a sign. Your heart's not right, and ultimately your words are going to condemn you. And then, like you mentioned, the emphasis on taking action, too. You know, we looked at this in our discussion with the men of Nineveh, or the queen of the south. Here's both Gentile people that when they had an opportunity to learn or to follow the message of God, they did it.
Yeah.
And yet the Pharisees, who knew better,
Right.
who knew the world, the old law, knew the prophecies, all of that, when they have the truth before them, even a miracle before them, they go, that's the devil. Yeah. And then Jesus ends up this section in chapter 13, verse 46 through 50, ultimately saying, it's those who do the will of my Father who's in heaven who are truly my brother and sister. Kingdom is greater than family. Kingdom is number one. And wait, kind of reminds me of Matthew 6, verse 33. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness.
And going back to what Nick has talked about almost every week, that goes back to Matthew 5:20, that your righteousness needs to exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. And there's the contrast that we saw going all the way back to before the Sermon on the Mount, carrying all the way through.
Well, like his faded shirt says, we have to be better.
Yes.
And our righteousness has to be better than the scribes and the Pharisees. And their righteousness was a self-righteousness. It was to be seen, and it wasn't from the heart, as we're talking about. Well, now we get into a section of parables. Now, this is the first time we have this in the book of Matthew, where most Bible students are familiar that Jesus taught in parables. Nick, on the spot, how would you define a parable to somebody? Someone goes, what's a parable? What is it?
An earthly message with a heavenly meaning.
That's a good Sunday school answer.
That's a
There you
good
go.
textbook answer.
Yeah. I would go with that.
Yeah. I mean, and really a parable is, taking something like that or I know and saying, look, the spiritual thing that you cannot see is like this earthly thing you can see. And so now he's taking that, saying, here's what the kingdom of God is. Right? The kingdom, you can see the kingdom, but you can't see the kingdom. Here's what the kingdom is like in comparison to this.
So it's an extended illustration or metaphor that ties into a spiritual truth.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, and Jesus speaks in parables a lot.
Right.
And we're going to talk about why he does it. I think a lot of people would have that question. They go, why is he talking this way? Why doesn't he just tell us what he wants us to do? And I think a lot of times we want the Bible to be more black and white than it is.
These were common for the day too.
Okay.
These aren't things that are, here Jesus comes on the scene and all of a sudden he starts talking to parables. Well, people talk to parables all the time.
They knew about parables.
They knew what Jesus was doing when he did it. They go, like we've heard similar things like this before, and so you put that in perspective and you go, okay, now when him saying this is not just a culture shock to these people.
No.
Here's a individual. Here's people that know what this is all about.
And it's neat too, because you talk about how it's just there was a normal practice at the time, but it's just not this fantasy fairy tale that's spinning too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is taking practical, everyday, common occurrences and just looking at them from a different perspective, and it jumps out different.
From a teaching standpoint, that's huge
Yeah.
because they're primarily it's a spoken word that they're having to learn right now. Not everybody can read. Not everybody's writing. Not everybody has the scrolls with them.
Sure.
So if you want the message to stick, you have to illustrate it. So songs, poems, stories, right? And even today in our preaching, one of the things we emphasize a lot, and I know with Nick we've talked about this before, that a lot of times where preachers lack is making the story and the application and making it stick with somebody, as opposed to just, maybe if Jesus just said, here's what the kingdom is, we would remember. But we remember the parable.
Well, and that's what it does trigger that memory, because here we're going to see 7 parables, and they're all the next time you're out there planting in the garden. Oh, you're going to think of this. When you start seeing mustard seed, you're going to think of this. I mean, it just goes through everything. When you're pulling weeds, you're going to be thinking, oh, this is what he was talking about.
Everyday things.
Everyday things.
Oh, it's like, oh man, Lou, enlightened everything, So very cool.
And it reiterates the message that Matthew's getting at.
Yeah.
That Jesus is this great teacher.
Yeah.
This authoritative teacher. He is this Messiah.
And he teaches in a way with authority as Messiah, and it's a message that will stick.
Yeah.
So let's read it. Matthew 13, verse 1. That day, Jesus went out of the house and was sitting by the sea. So it's later on. It's not immediately, I think, after talking to these individuals. I think that day is, I don't want to say arbitrary, but he's saying the next day, another day coming along. That day, Jesus went out of the house and was sitting by the sea. And large crowds gathered to him. So he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd was standing on the beach. And I've always loved this scene, because Jesus is just chilling by the sea, and everybody comes around him because they want to be around Jesus, they want to learn from him.
Right.
And Jesus gets into a boat and kind of drifts away from the sea a little, or the shore, and begins to speak. From an acoustical standpoint, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because the natural acoustics of a lake or the water there would make it easier for them to hear it. So I'd like to preach on a lake sometime if I could get the opportunity.
Well, that is neat, because it reiterates that Matthew's actually talking about something that happened, a practice that now science backs up.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's real life.
It was anecdotal back then that, if I get on the boat, people will be able to hear me more. But now we understand it, which just reiterates what Matthew is getting at.
Yeah, Jesus is that great teacher. Well, let's see how he teaches. He says, and he spoke many things. So we don't even have all of the things, but many things to them in parables, earthly story, heavenly meaning, as Nick described it, saying, behold, the sower went out to sow. Now, we'll skim through this parable, then we'll talk about the explanation here in a bit. But a sower is a person throwing seeds. So here you have, behold, the sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell beside the road, and the birds came and ate it up. And others fell on the rocky places where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up because they had no depth of soil. But when the sun had risen, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. Others fell among the thorns, and the thorns came up and choked them out. And others fell on the good soil and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. So here's our first illustration. We'll talk about the specifics in a bit, but as you mentioned, this is an illustration that would have been relevant to them. It was an agrarian society. They're used to planting. They're used to sowing seeds. They know what could happen when that goes wrong. Being in the Central Valley here, most everybody at one time had at least a job tied to agriculture. We understand crops a little bit even more here than maybe even in a big city. So he lays out this parable, and then he concludes it with, if you have ears, you can hear. So now, he just says this, and the disciples hear this parable, verse 10, and they came to him and said, why do you speak to them in parables? Now, that's a fair question, because if I was a disciple, you have all these crowds right here. Jesus should be telling them, repent, follow me, do this, do that. And he doesn't. He speaks to them a parable. And here's the answer that Jesus gives his disciples. Nick, you want to read for us? Verse 11.
And he said to them, to you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given.
So what do you think he means?
I mean, here you've got, so two crowds of people, right? You've got crowds of people who've been following Jesus at a distance, and you've got a crowd of people or a group of people who've been following Jesus very closely. And so a group of people that are following him closely, learning from him, trying to understand what it is, the mission of his ministry, are having questions about, what do you mean when you're saying this to them? Why do you think that they'll understand this parable?
Mhm.
Is basically what I get from this.
Well, I think I like Jesus' answer though too.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of getting to.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
He said, "To you has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given." I think there's a later verse that talks about the idea of what the parable actually does. The parable does, they may hear it, but it might just go right over their head. They may hear it, it may stick. They may hear it, they may think about it for a long time. They may hear it, go, "Hey, I know what that is."
Well, so Jesus has been talking to his disciples directly. It
So-
seems like they have a special privilege.
Right. I'm not condensing this very, very good, but the disciples are the people that are going to understand this very
Yeah.
well.
So the disciples are going to understand the mysteries. Jesus has allotted them a special privilege
Right.
of knowledge. Okay, they get the insight, or the secrets right now,
Right.
and the other people, only those to whom it's been granted, basically are going to receive this. So, to me, it almost seems like a parable serves as a filter.
Yeah.
So let's look a little bit more. Verse 13 or verse 12. For whoever has, to him more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away from him. Therefore, so if you didn't understand what Jesus is saying, he's explaining it now. Therefore, I speak to them in parables, because while seeing they do not see, and while hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. So it's been granted to the disciples to understand, but these people, it hasn't been directly granted. So he speaks to them in this long illustration so that they can't understand? I mean, what is he saying?
No, it's for the ones that essentially are seeking that message, or are seeking that truth. They will understand it. It's not just something that I'm going to just lay in your lap.
Yeah.
You need to do some work with it.
Could it be...
So, and I think too, when you go back to the original parable that Jesus talks about here, he says, "A sower went out to sow, and some seed fell along the path." So he gives these 4 different illustrations of different, when a sower in the common day was throwing seed, he's not necessarily controlling where he's throwing the seed, i.e. we would say that this is Jesus preaching the message about the kingdom of God. He's speaking the message all over the place, telling people, but not all this is going to stick. Some fell by the roadside, right? So just went over their head.
Yeah.
They didn't, nothing. The next one is some fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and immediately it sprang up and had no depth of soil. So in other words, it was something of the nature that, through the seed, it really didn't have any place, not like the roadside where nothing stuck, but the soil, it just didn't have the means.
I don't want to skip ahead to the of the parable, the explanation, but I think you're right. I think, like you're saying, the sowing of the seed,
right,
and the parable works as a filter of soil.
Yes.
To see what is good soil and what is not. At least that's what I'm seeing here.
Right.
But I think that the same explanation ties to more than just this parable, though, because the disciples asked,
all parables.
"Why do you speak in parables?"
All parables.
And if you go back to the verse 9 here, "He who has ears, let him hear." Jesus used that same phrase when he was talking about how great John the Baptist was.
Right.
And it was needed that use your ears and think.
Yeah,
You got to think. And I think also, segueing into the next little couple verses here, that we see Matthew use Isaiah's words to further elaborate Jesus' point on these parables and what Jesus is getting across.
Right.
So some people they don't see even though they do see. Some people aren't going to hear even though they can hear. So just those that are seeing what Jesus is doing and hearing his words, they're not necessarily going to respond appropriately.
Right.
So let's look at what Curtis says here, this prophecy in Isaiah, verse 14. In their case, in the case of the people that don't hear, in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled, which says, "You will keep on hearing, but will not understand. You will keep on seeing, but you will not perceive. For the heart of this people has become dull. With their ears they scarcely hear, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they would see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand with their heart and return, and I would heal them." So he lays it out for us here, and I think this ties into everything he's talked about before.
Sure.
You have some people that they refuse to open their eyes. You have some people that have their fingers in their ear when Jesus is speaking, going, no, I don't want to hear. And Jesus saying the problem is not their eyes. The problem is not their ears.
Right.
The problem is their heart.
Right. So it's not what they see and what they hear, it's what they're willing to receive.
Yeah.
And so you're saying that this is kind of, because you said in chapter 13, verse 1, talks about the same day or about the same time. So is
Right.
Matthew just continuing what he talked about in the last chapter?
I have a hard time saying that it's. I don't think Matthew's trying to be chronological, but I think it's more didactic.
Okay, so
This
Right.
section ties into
Okay.
the previous
so
section.
the thought,
Yeah.
the message that Matthew is getting across here further elaborates the point he was getting across in the
Yes,
previous
and I think that's how Matthew works it a lot, because we don't have a day-by-day accounting of everything Jesus did.
I mean,
But Matthew emphasizes certain events in Jesus' life to further the purpose of the gospel.
how does this bring? I mean, we look at this part of the story and say, how does it bring us to the end of the story? Where
Yeah.
does this take us at the end of the story? Where does this take us into
And how does it
the
connect to the
next
previous
part,
part?
of the story? And so, how does this, this parable here influence what we see at the end of the gospel accounts? The death, the burial, the resurrection. How does that all play in what these people are seeing with this particular, this particular parable?
Well, and I think so. In Matthew 12, let's just talk about one of the big things that happens. He casts out a demon, and people accuse him of having the devil.
Yeah.
That shows their heart.
Right.
They saw, they heard, they rejected.
Sure.
Their heart was flawed.
Right.
The reason Jesus is preaching in parables is he doesn't want to cast the pearls before the swine of those people that don't have a good heart. Jesus speaks in a parable so that the people that actually want to learn and hear will learn.
Right.
The information is there. Even a teacher sometime might give a textbook and say, read the chapter, and you'll be able to ace the test. The kids that actually read the chapter are going to do fine on the test. The kids that just look at it, open it up, and play video games, don't pay attention, they're not going to do well.
Right.
Here you have people that right now they refuse to see, and I want to emphasize the refusal.
Yeah.
It's not that they're unable to.
Right.
They
Yeah.
barely hear. They close their eyes. They close their ears.
So it's
They
very
don't-
specific. They are not receiving the message. Why? Verse 15. And I want to emphasize this. For the heart of this people has become dull. That's why they've closed their eyes. That's why they don't hear. And then he says at the end of verse 15, basically if they would change, I'd heal them. That's an applicable message to us today.
Right.
If they choose to see with their eyes, if they choose to hear with their
Yeah.
ears, and understand, I'm there. I'm waiting right there.
Are you willing to hear the truth? And man, this applies so much in so many parts of our life.
Yeah.
So often we have a preconceived idea, whether it be religiously or anything, and we only want to receive information that reinforces our preconceived idea.
Right.
And if the information we receive goes against that idea, we reject the information.
Yeah. So we surround ourselves in an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And so the thought I was thinking is what that may be an aspect of it, but is that the entire aspect of to how their hearts became dull, or even tying that to us today? How do our hearts become dull today? Because I think this is directly applicable to us as well.
How do
Yeah.
our hearts become? That's
Well,
a good question.
look, I mean, we've talked about this in previous sessions too. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33, the idea of seeking. And then back in chapter 12 and verse 50, for whoever does the will of my Father, right? Seek first the kingdom of God, seek to do what God wills you to do. The problem, the error here is that they're not seeking really to do God's will. They're seeking to do their own will. And that's evident through almost all the chapters and almost all the encounters we've had with the Pharisees. They're not seeking to see, okay, God has sent this individual into the world to bring something 10 times as good as what we have. And all we see is this individual taking away our influence. This is a problem because now we can't do what we want to do.
So because of that, their heart is flawed because they don't see Jesus the right way.
Right. So again, then how do we apply that to? How do we apply that? To
I want to
us?
go back to Curtis's question. How do we get to this point where our hearts are so hard? Do you have an answer to that? What do you think?
I asked the question.
But I didn't know if it was rhetorical.
I think because I was kind of building off of that concept of surrounding ourselves with the people who say what we want to say, and I think that the Pharisees were guilty of that, or completely ignoring something that would lessen our position or hurt our argument, if you
Or
will.
challenge us,
Yeah.
make us feel guilty. And I think you get that a lot too. Jesus preached a message that condemned them. And instead of repenting, they rejected it. And if we are only ever seeking messages that reaffirm us, that just tickle our ears, that shows a heart problem.
Right. Yeah.
But if we seek a message that challenges us, that corrects us, that forces us to improve, like Nick Shirt forces us to be better, then we can have a better heart. And I think that's what happened here. And there's many different angles. Like Nick said, they're losing their influence. As you said, they're being condemned, all this kind of stuff. But ultimately, they did something, or their inaction led them to a point where now their heart is hardened and they don't want to hear the message.
And so we could fall into that position when we hear a lesson. And the lesson is that we say, yeah, other people need to be out there doing that. Why aren't they going out and doing it, but we don't do it ourselves?
Yeah.
If we need to be more bold in our actions and what we say in our belief and our encouragement and our lives, do we actually go out and live it, or do we just say, that was a good message, Cliff. Nick, why aren't you being bolder?
Yeah.
You need to be bolder.
It's about accepting responsibility.
Yeah.
There you go. Their heart is
Accepting
flawed
your
because they're not accepting responsibility.
Right.
I see this unfold too, and I'll give my soapbox a little bit. People don't always want to be challenged, even in our own congregation and other congregations I've been in. I mean, and preached. People want to, and it's funny, what we call hard, tough preaching is usually preaching that condemns everybody else but ourselves.
Yeah.
Tell us why everybody else is wrong, and that's a tough sermon. No, the sermon I need to hear, the sermon you need to hear, we all need to hear, is a sermon that says why I'm wrong and need to fix myself.
Yeah.
That's the tough lesson.
Well, and that's to that point is we easily fall. I fall into this when I hear a message and I completely ignore the application
To me.
that God, that Jesus, that the Bible is making to me.
Yeah.
And I just focus it on everybody else.
How does this apply to everybody else? Yeah. So that's how their heart became dull. And because of that, they can't hear the message. I wrote in the margin of my Bible a long time ago, if your heart is not right, then your eyes and ears will not be right. So the reason maybe the message doesn't connect with you, the reason why you don't understand the message might not be the messenger's fault. It could be your fault because your heart is flawed.
I mean, and that really, the thing we need to, I think, pick out here is that the most important thing, the thing that's more important than any other thing, I mean, I think this is emphasized all throughout the entire story of God's people is that God cares about what's in our heart, not necessarily what our actions display. Because you can do a lot of things. You can do a lot of good things.
You can fool everybody but God.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it doesn't,
Yeah.
So
it kind of like ties into Acts chapter 5 on how that we can appear righteous in front of other people, but if we're just lying to ourselves, it just completely, what happens in Ananias.
again,
Isn't that my sermon on Sunday that I told you I was going to be preaching?
The one that you preached this morning?
Yeah, so we got Curtis right. So even though we're recording this to the audience right now on a Friday, Curtis is referencing a sermon that I haven't preached yet. This is like some butterfly effect or some kind of weird thing going on here. But
circling back, to get us back on track. But it
Back
shows
to the
that
future.
it's directly applicable.
Yeah.
Right.
And so if I am just sitting in a pew and not living this in my daily life and not identifying those issues that I have, those weaknesses that I have, the opportunities that I have, then I am in the exact same position the Pharisees.
Yep.
My heart is dull, my ears are closed, my eyes are closed.
if we believe we're infallible, we'll never take responsibility for our failures, for our shortcomings, for the things that we don't do right. If we understand that we're infallible, that is where self-reflection takes place. That is where you start to see, here's my responsibility, not just as, a husband and a father, but as a disciple, as a follower of Jesus. Here's my responsibility to all these other things that fall in line.
So, the follow-up question. If we've established some ways in which our heart is dull, how do we overcome that?
Well, let's read these next two verses, and then we'll discuss this a little bit. But blessed are your eyes, verse 16, because they see, and your ears, because they hear. For truly I say to you, now I think he's talking to his disciples here right now, but truly I say to you, many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. What differentiated the disciples from the crowds? the willingness to follow Jesus is what stands out to me. When Jesus said, "Come and follow me," they did. And if we have a willingness, when Jesus says, "Come," we say, "Okay." If we are willing to follow Jesus, I think that shows our heart. And that will reflect in our willingness to see the truth, to listen to the truth. If we are always pushing against the idea of following Jesus, we're never going to see, we're never going to hear. What made the disciples different is they weren't just fair weather followers, you know what I mean? They were there through thick and thin, through the difficult times, following Jesus all the way to death.
And wanting to know, wanting to know, wanting to understand.
Right. Because they saw that God had stretched out his hand to humanity to restore a relationship that was lost. And I think that when we go back to this idea, when your heart is dull, when your heart is hard, you're not looking for that opportunity to restore a relationship. You think you're infallible. So there's no reason for you to connect back with God.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason for you to say, "God, I need your grace. God, I need you to forgive me of my sins. God, I need you to help me to discern and to have the wisdom to do this thing." There is no need for that when you're infallible. But if you're fallible, then, again, I'm going to reiterate this point, self-reflection and responsibility take place.
I think you're right. You continue.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, then, so if you look at this as a whole, then, he spoke in a parable. The disciples asked why.
Right.
The answer to why is not everybody sees like you see yet.
Yep.
You see things clearer than most people.
Right.
So the parable serves as a sieve or a filter to give opportunity to the good hearts to hear the message,
Sure.
and maybe it's not a way of good saying, but an opportunity for those that are going to reject it to just hurry up and reject it, because they're not going to get it. The ones that don't want to hear the truth are going to go, sowers, seed, ground. What's all that about? I don't want to have anything to do with this and leave. But the ones that get it, they're going to get it, and they're going to follow and get just like the disciples here.
Roll up your sleeves and dig in.
The ones that want to hear
Right.
the truth.
Right.
So then he explains the parable. Hear then the parable of the sower. So kind of had a little intermission where he answers their question about the parable. And notice, he's not giving the explanation of the parable to the audience.
No, but he's further elaborating the point that he's made to his or his disciples.
He just left the parable hanging out there and then talked to his disciples.
Right.
So the people on the seashore are going, "Oh, maybe that's about me. Maybe I could be soil. Oh, what if the seeds," all that kind of stuff. They're thinking.
Birds.
Yeah, there's some other guy saying that, right? Yeah. So he says, "Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom," and we knew where we were going with this, but that's the message of all this. The word of the kingdom, that's the message Jesus preached. Kingdom is key word of the book of Matthew. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart, key word, and this is the one on whom the seed was sown beside the road. The Pharisees in chapter 12, when they heard the message of Jesus and said, "I know he has a demon," they're that person there.
Right.
They heard the word, they didn't understand it, the devil snatched it up from them. That's option number one, and we have to plug ourselves in here.
Yeah.
Which one are we? Hopefully we're not this one, because the person on the road, when they hear the word, it's snatched away immediately by the evil one. And notice, it's not the devil's fault. It's not the evil one's fault. It says when they do not understand, the evil one comes and snatches it away. So there's personal responsibility there too.
There is.
So the word comes, do we understand it or not? And that sounds bad. Well, I just don't get it. I don't understand. No. Jesus has already emphasized it's a willingness to, unwillingness to understand.
Right. So the willingness to understand prevents this measure altogether. Well, I don't, I want to understand, so now I'm going to follow.
Yeah.
I don't want to understand, so I don't even know, what does this mean to me? What am I supposed to do with this? You're telling me this parable that has nothing to do with, I don't, and that.
There's a difference between that attitude and maybe Curtis not getting and going, "Oh, tell me a little bit more, explain a little bit further."
Right.
Yeah.
Asking a thought-provoking question in the middle of a great discussion.
Yeah. So that's
And
option
that's
one.
So, to circle around a little bit, the reason the birds were able to come snatch it away is because it wasn't in the ground.
Yeah.
And that's what the
It
word
wasn't
here
in their heart.
It's not embedded in their
Right.
heart, which if you look at what James talks about, how we need to receive the word and implant it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So if we don't want the evil one to snatch it away, for me, I need to implant the word, which we'll see 5 times in this section. We need to implant that word in our hearts.
Right. We need to be, actively thinking and trying to understand.
I got
Six
six times,
times.
Curtis.
Six
I was going
times.
to
Yeah,
challenge you on
six
that
times.
one.
I ran out of hands or fingers.
Okay, so let's think about us then. The message is given. I'll put it on me since I'm the preacher. So I'm preaching a message on Sunday. If you hear it and understand it, part of understanding is taking it to heart, not just good lesson, it's living it out. If not, the evil one might snatch it out and you're the bad soil. That's option number 1. Option number 2, verse 20. The one on whom the seed was sown in the rocky places, this is the man who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. So the heart isn't inherently flawed. This person's excited to hear the message. Well, this is great. And yet he has no firm root in himself. But it's in his heart.
Yeah.
And it's only temporary. And when affliction or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he falls away. I imagine that would be a lot of the people, the multitudes.
Right.
They're excited to hear the message from Jesus. They're gung-ho when he's doing signs and miracles. And they follow him for a little while, but all of a sudden now there's no food. Or there's affliction, there's persecution. Now all of a sudden following Jesus means people want to kill you. They back away.
I mean, and then you ask yourself the question, what kind of tribulation or persecution would cause me to walk away from Jesus?
Yeah.
I mean, because we might say, well, if they throw me in prison, that's not going to cause me to walk away from Jesus. Oh, if they make me, a slave, and that's not going to walk. Well, what if they start killing my family members?
Yeah.
What if they start taking away the things that I love in my life? But then I'll say, I'll put my hands up and say, no.
Or,
What's it? Is it worth? Is what it costs of value to you?
or a little closer to home, what if we can't get together in person to worship for a period of time?
Mm-hmm.
What if we have to put effort into it to
Right.
open our eyes, open our ears to get together with the body?
Yeah, or there's risk involved or anything. I mean,
Right.
So we have to just kind of lay out these different soils. First soil, and I'm kind of coming up with this off the top of my head, but the first soil was, if we describe the heart, it was an evil heart. It was a closed heart, one that refuses to
Hard
understand.
heart.
A hard heart.
Yeah.
Second example is maybe
Pirate heart?
Huh?
Not that
No.
one, like-
a weak heart, maybe. The heart had a motivation, but it was weak. It wasn't strong enough. The next one is maybe a distracted one. Look at verse 22. And the one on whom the seed was sown among the thorns, this is the man who hears the word, and the worry of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. So again, this guy gets the message, but he gets distracted. It's like, oh, squirrel, right?
And that's what. So I wrote down back in verse 7 that there's nothing wrong with this soil. The soil where the thorns come and choke it out. We don't ever get an indication that this person falls away. So the first person just didn't receive it at all. The second person got it for a little bit, was on fire, and then faded away. This person never falls away.
I never thought about that
This
before.
person is still sitting in the pew beside us.
But it becomes unfruitful.
But it's unfruitful. And so that's what does our heart will reflect our fruit. By their fruit you will know them.
Right.
So which soil am I? I'd love to say I'm the good soil, but am I producing fruit?
Yeah.
Or am I just the soil, the seed that was, or the soil that has thorns around it? Because if I'm not producing fruit, I can still be.
You still have the word.
Yeah.
I wrote here, and I don't know when I wrote this in the margin right next to that verse, pew warmers. But yeah, I got the word, I know it, but I just warm the pew every Sunday, or in the patio on this Sunday. But yeah, I'm not really doing anything for Jesus.
I mean, to me, this. When I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, not only distracted, because I get distracted. I have ADD. I'm constantly, my brain's all over the place. What I'm seeing here is that what's more valuable than the word that has been sown in their hearts is the cares of the world and the deceitfulness.
It's a
of riches.
divided heart.
The cares of the world. Well, man, I really want what's in this life. Or riches are going to make me happy.
Yeah.
Having a lot of money is going to make me a happy person. But that's what's more valuable to them than man. It's important for me to make sure that I have a heart for God. I have a heart for Jesus. I have a heart for compassion for people. I learned to understand what it means to give grace and receive grace and give mercy and receive mercy and to be a student of Jesus.
So this person's priorities are just
Yeah.
wrong.
And so
Yeah.
it's and if I
Right.
am not fruitful,
Right.
if I am not productive, then my priorities are wrong.
Right. That's my own fault. It's not anybody else's fault. It's not the word's fault. It's not just some person who spoke the word. It's my fault for not trying to see what I could get from that. How does this apply to me? What do I do now that I've heard this?
Well, and this is so relevant today because we've seen this with all sorts of people we've brought to Jesus or tried to. First person, you try to get them to follow Jesus, and they just always reject it.
Mhm.
That's them.
Yeah.
Second person, they convert, they get baptized, they're on fire, but they fall away because they never got grounded. Their heart was distracted, and all that, and they had no root.
Right.
And then you have another person who probably. There's a large percentage of Christians that fall into this, myself included at times, where I received the word. I say I love Jesus. I know what the Bible says, but I also love my free time, love my hobbies, love my money, love my TV, love all of that, and I'm distracted and divided, and we fall into one of these. And then finally, verse 23, and the one on whom the seed was sown on the good soil, this is the man who hears the word and understands it and bears fruit, because the last one was unfruitful,
Right.
and brings forth 100-fold, some 60, some 30.
Yeah, and
Right.
there's the contrast with the first, the guy on the rocky soil or the side of the road where they do not understand. This person understands. This person gets it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and go ahead, Nick.
No, I was just gonna say. And we know, the people get it. You can see it. They know, they understand what they're supposed to do. They know what God expects of them. They know what they're supposed to do. But and by doing that, they bear fruit.
Yeah.
And it's not just in a category of evangelism. It's not just but in your own life, how do you produce fruit that is pleasing to God? How do you produce fruit that makes people go, man, I want to follow Jesus? And it's not necessarily, all because we see the numbers and we go, oh, evangelism, that's what we think, and it's not necessarily about evangelism, but what kind of when your heart is good, when you understand the message, what kind of fruit is produced.
And see, we're digesting this right now in the intended way that Jesus wanted the audience to.
Right.
But there'd be some people on the lakeshore hearing this that aren't digesting it. Now, the conclusion I come to when looking at this is you have a good heart, hears the message, understands the message, and bears fruit.
Right.
And some people, I love picturing that. Some people were hearing this parable and they were making that same conclusion.
Right.
The disciples had to have it explained to them a little bit, and we're breaking down his explanation. But
Right.
Some people got it without the explanation.
some people got it without the explanation.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of cool to me.
Yeah.
So, what is fruit? What constitutes fruit?
Right.
In our lives, what is fruit?
I think it's righteous obedience.
Right.
I think it is. It's following Jesus' will. It's doing what he says. It's bringing souls to him. It's sacrificing self for others. It's repentance, all of that.
I liked what you said in the Zoom class a couple weeks ago. We were talking about, back in chapter 12, the good fruit and the bad fruit. And those two different Greek words that are used.
Kalos and
Kalos being, and I had never, I guess, understood it this way, but kalos being the idea of beautiful, it looks good on the outside, but in the inside it's rotten, right? So then the idea of agathos, right? That's what you said was all the way through it's good. It not only looks good on the outside, but all the way through it's good.
Good fruit
And so-
comes from a good place. And
morally good.
Morally
Yeah.
good, right? So that's what I'm saying. We could maybe define moral as is good all the way through, not just what's on the outside.
And it's interesting that section was in chapter 12,
Yeah.
verse 33. Either make the tree good and fruit good, or make the tree bad. And that same word "make" is translated as bears here.
Right.
It's that poieo word, the
Right.
do word. You
Make
actually
a
have
choice.
to do it. And so the question that I wrote here, and I wrote it in red, and I highlighted it, is what are you doing? Am I bearing fruit?
Yeah.
And if I want to be a good soil, one who hears the word, one who understands the word, what fruit am I bearing? What am I doing with it?
And if you can't identify fruit, and I don't mean it in a self-righteous, inflate my ego way, but if you can't identify obedience and righteousness and bearing fruit in your life, there's changes we need to make.
Maybe there's some thorns around me.
Yeah, and maybe there's thorns around me. Maybe I'm being distracted by other things. Maybe my job is a thorn. My hobbies are a thorn.
My family.
Yeah, all of that. It can become that distraction. We got to make sure that we are that good heart that hears, understands, and bears fruit.
And the difference again is, we keep going back to the one in verse 23 takes responsibility. He takes responsibility.
Mhm.
He as the one who's sown on the good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He understands. That's what I got to do. That's what I got to do.
And
this is what's going to please God. Not. Well, if I just do it and it looks good to other people, it's not really good, right? But if I'm doing what I'm doing to please God, there's a difference between. There's a very thick dividing line between those two things.
Yeah. Well, if we bring it all home, then as we kind of wrap up this section, then tonight, he begins this by giving this parable. He explains why he preaches in parables. It's to filter out, good soil and bad soil in a sense.
Right.
And then he says that the word of the kingdom is presented. Some people aren't going to accept that word of the kingdom,
Yep.
and some people will. We need to make sure that we are people that hear, understand, and do. And I think that's a good place to stop tonight. We're going to have a lot of discussion about this, I'm sure, in the Zoom class.
Oh yeah.
And I encourage all of you that are tuning in to have some questions. Because, man, you can discuss the parable of the sower for years and talk about how it applies. It's so relevant even today. But I do thank you for participating in this study tonight. Keep sharing the links. Share the Sunday morning worship. Let people know what's going on. Keep communicating with people. There's a lot of people that are falling through the cracks during this time of separation. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. You want an opportunity to bear some fruit? Simple. Write some cards. Make some calls. Do some safe visiting and all of that kind of thing, and work on leading people to Jesus. There's a lot of people searching right now. There's a lot of people that have needs right now. Let's be the people that meet those needs. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good evening.